Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Oblong online event. I'm Suzanna Hermans, co-owner of Oblong Books. Before I introduce our guest this evening, if you have questions for Danny or myself at any time during the presentation, you can either enter them in the chat on the right side of your screen or in the Ask a Question module at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them at the end of the program. For those of you who'd like to purchase a signed copy of How to Resist Amazon and Why, there's a Buy the Book button at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you who prefer to listen, there is a link to pre-order the audiobook in the chat. We couldn't be more excited to have Danny Caine joining us this evening to talk about his new book, an expansion of his zine of the same name. Danny is also the author of the poetry collections Continental Breakfast, El Dorado Freddy's, and Flavortown. His writing has appeared in Literary Hub, Publishers Weekly, Barrel House, Hobart, and other places. In 2019, he was named the Midwest Independent Booksellers Association Bookseller of the Year. The owner of the Raven Bookstore, he lives in Lawrence, Kansas. Hi, Danny.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. And nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. I have to say, I was sitting in front of you at the American Booksellers Association had a antitrust seminar in DC.
Oh,
I want to
that's
say like
right.
January 2020, February
Yeah.
2020. And I was sitting in front of you and I was too shy to introduce myself, which is not very like me. But I have been admiring your work for quite some time, so I'm super excited to get to talk to you today.
Well, thanks. That antitrust symposium was really the seed for this book. So much of what I learned that day ended up framing my arguments and my thoughts as I put together as I transitioned from zine to full length book with this project.
So I definitely want to delve into what got you on this path. But let's start with, can you share your bookseller origin story? I don't know it. How did you
Sure.
come to be in this crazy business with us?
Yeah, it's a good question. I went to school to be a high school teacher, and I tried that for 3 years, and it just didn't work. That career fizzled. And so, without knowing what else to do, I went to that was in Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up. And so then I went to get a master's degree in English because I wasn't sure what else to do. While my passion for teaching had faded, my passion for reading and writing remained. And so it's like, okay, let's see what we can do. And while I was there, I really fell in love with writing poetry, which I had done in undergrad, but it became, with the right kind of set of mentors, it became something that seemed like I wanted to pursue more. And so I applied for MFA programs. And my wife was applying for grad school at the same time, and we both got accepted to the University of Kansas with full funding. So it was time to move to Lawrence, Kansas. And as I got here, we came over Easter weekend. It was 6 or 7 years ago now. We were just exploring downtown, and I was like, oh cool, they have a little bookstore here. I had never lived in a place that had a little bookstore this central to downtown. And we walked in and we saw two women holding a screaming cat trying to trim its nails. It was the first thing I saw when I walked in. And I was like, I think I'm going to like this place. It seems funny and weird. And then, 6 months after we moved here, I got a job as a part-time bookseller, and just the rest is history. I fell in love. It's a magic place. The owner, my boss, about a year into my time here, started talking about retiring, and I started thinking about ways I could swing it to kind of enter the profession full time, and we worked something out together. And then I graduated in May of 2017 and bought the store in August.
Holy smokes. That is an incredible leap of faith. Um,
Yeah,
Bravo.
thanks. I did. It was like emotionally, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I was like, I have to. Like, that's, I mean, even my first couple of shifts working Saturday mornings, I write about this in the book. Like, I used to imagine about dreaming. I used to dream about owning the store. Um, and of course, it made sense. Like, I feel like many of us could imagine ourselves running bookstores. It's such a romantic idea. But then also, like, it's a robust business. The previous owners had been great caretakers. It's profitable. It's well beloved in the community. It's a really well established brand. Like, the more I looked at the numbers and did research, it was a total no brainer. So it didn't actually feel like that much of a leap of faith, because like all I had to do was keep going. and I would find success. And I would argue that's been the case.
Oh, that's spectacular. I had the opposite origin story, which is that I was born into this business.
Oh yeah.
Yes, my dad started our store in 1975, and I literally grew up in the bookstore. I would be dropped off at the bookstore every day after preschool and just let loose among the books to do whatever I wanted. And then when I was old enough to see over the counter, I was allowed to ring people out. And then, kind of the rest is history for me too. But it's so encouraging to me. There was definitely a period because I feel like we're about the same age. There was a period in my career where for many, many, many years, I was always the youngest person at every conference. And I wasn't seeing any new people coming into bookselling. And then it shifted so fast. And now there are so many younger folks starting stores or buying stores. I have such great hope for our industry. I think we're in incredible hands.
Yeah, I think the cultivation of the next generation of booksellers is very, very important to me. It's kind of a pet cause. I serve on the Midwest Independent Bookselling board. I very well may soon serve on the ABA board, and that's one of my missions in getting involved at these levels is to make sure people of exciting young booksellers have entry points to this great profession. Because if we don't cultivate a new generation of booksellers, like we need leadership, we need help, we need energy. Because it's a good industry. It's an industry worth fighting for, but it needs caretakers for sure. It's not going to take care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So you made us a book. So as I was reading this incredible book, also P.S. this book is 120 odd pages long. It is $12.95, and you learn so much so quickly, and it's so well told. I feel like this is a book I could give to everyone because even, no matter what your relationship to Amazon, whether you shop there all the time or you would never shop there, you're going to find stuff in this book that is fascinating to you and really eye-opening and will either confirm or blow your mind. And I think as a bookseller, as someone who was in this business when Amazon started, albeit I was a child, but watching my dad deal with this, and be really afraid for his business, be scared for our entire industry, and watching all the bookstores in the country just sort of have a collective freak out and get really defensive and really like, this is bad. We need to not be, we need to shut this down. And how can we compete with this? And then I think we all just got tired of talking about it. We just got fatigued of defending our business and fatigued with trying to explain why Amazon is bad. I know for quite a while, just sort of avoided the topic because it was so, oops, we lost Danny. Let's see if we can get him back here.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Yay. Okay, great. I'm not sure how much of that you caught, but basically the gist is like, but the bookselling community as a whole got so fatigued of trying to defend ourselves against Amazon that a lot of us sort of just stepped back and stopped talking about it. And I am so grateful that you have really stepped up to bring this back to the forefront of our conversation because it matters more than ever now. And it's a really important fight that you're doing and that we're all doing. I don't shop at Amazon and have not done so. But I know most people do. And I don't judge them for it. I'm not like a crazy person who thinks that everyone's going to stop shopping on Amazon. But this book gives you some tools and some reasons why even just a small movement of your spending away from this company can do so much. So can you tell us a little bit about how this all got started?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. It started from those concerns that you just shared. I found in my entry into the book business, it was something we talked about a lot at conferences, like the one we already discussed. It was something that happened on Facebook group pages that were for booksellers only. This was a discussion really intricate and interesting and passionate discussion about the effects of Amazon and reasons to resist it. But it was happening in a closed circle among booksellers, which is great. I think you need to charge up the base. I think we need to be kind of unified in why what we do is important and the forces that are trying to stop us from doing that. But I think if we didn't bring this to our customers and our communities, it wasn't going to get anywhere. We were talking about things that were so interesting among ourselves that I thought our communities needed to know. And this is something that the Raven has been doing really well for 30 years. We had our first round one of the Raven versus the corporate giants was the Raven versus Borders. We had a Borders that was right across the street from us, and the original owners, Pat Cady was one of the original owners. She was a wizard at talking to reporters and getting media attention and firing up support for small businesses in the media. And just talking about the importance of a place like this to the community. And that's baked into the Raven. That's part of what we do. We've been doing that for decades. And so, of course, Borders went away in 2011. And in its ashes was Amazon, much stronger and more dangerous than Borders ever was. So I just continued the work that was being done. And I thought I was inspired by the previous work the Raven had done in bringing these questions to their community. And instead of I talk to reporters a lot, all they want, but I think my vehicle of choice for this messaging is social media. And we started getting more and more attention about doing this on social media, and it was resonating, and people were responding really well to a certain kind of arguments, not only about resisting Amazon, but uplifting and promoting small businesses. And then one of these things I posted on social media, it's Danny's audio. I'm sorry, I'm going to pause and try something here. What if when I unplugged my headphones, it muted me automatically?
Modern technology. We're making it work.
Okay, how is this?
Here, I'll talk a little bit.
Okay.
I can hear myself echoing in your computer.
So that's because I unplugged my headphones. All right. I told you I was bad luck with Crowdcast. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm cursed. Let me try one more thing.
You can also just try talking louder.
Okie doke. I'm going to just try to do one thing on my end. I am trying to adjust my mic volume. Okay. Testing. Is that better? Okay. I just turned up my mic and we'll see how that works.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
I am so sorry. Really, we were talking about this in the green room. Every virtual event I do has some sort of tech madness like this. I cannot wait until we could just put a bunch of chairs into a room and gather around and shake hands and hug. Okay. Where was I? Okay, so one of the things I posted on social media was an open letter to Jeff Bezos, and this is in the book. As we got more and more attention about advocating against Amazon and pro small businesses, I was like, I need an argument. Like, what am I arguing for? What's my manifesto or my thesis statement? And this is the teacher in me, right? What's my thesis? I need to make sure I'm arguing for something clear. A friend of mine who owns a bookstore in Cleveland sent me a text that was like, I think you should turn your letter to Jeff into a broadside or a zine. I loved that idea. So I just quickly compiled everything into a zine. It was called How to Resist Amazon and Why. When I was in grad school, I made poetry zines. I must have made 20 zines across the 3 years I was in grad school. It was just like an automatic thing for me. I really fell in love with zine making, so it was just something I had in my pocket. And in an afternoon, I compiled all the Twitter threads, the letter, a couple extra things, some pictures into a zine. And like, I had no idea what it was going to do. I thought we would sell like 50 at the Raven, and that would be it. But then, like, I was getting emails from all over the country, from all over the world, looking to carry this zine, and I was spending all night like stapling zines at my dining room table, trying to keep up with the demand. And then Joe Beal, who's the editor of Microcosm Publishing, reached out and was really interested in my project. They have taken a really interesting stance against Amazon as well. They don't sell to Amazon. They're one of the few publishers who refuses to deal directly with Amazon, and they wanted to put out a version of the zine. And I said, I'm happy to do that. This is great. I need the help. Like, I need my life back. I'm stapling zines every night. And so in the first couple months, they sold thousands. And that was October 2019. By December 2019, they emailed me and were like, we think you can turn this into a book. It's people are interested. I think there's more argument to be made, and I just totally agreed. So I signed the contract and got to work. So
Wow.
January 2020, and I turned it in October. So it was 8 or 9 months of kind of furious research and writing.
And also, there was a pandemic on.
Right, and yeah, also trying to keep my bookstore going. It was intense, but like it's an important project, and I felt a strange motivation to get it out by the spring. They wanted to release it in November, but I was like, I didn't know what the election when I turned in the book. I didn't know who was going to be the president. I didn't know like what congressional control would look like, and so I was like, this feels urgent to me. I'm willing to rush this book because, but as it turns out, I mean, March 2021 has been a perfect time to release this book because I think that in the past couple weeks, pressure on Amazon and discussion about all this stuff has really ramped up from a lot of different places other than me. And I really don't want this to seem like this is just me. Like, this isn't a Danny Caine fight. This is Amazon is much, much bigger than my bookstore and my book. And the issues associated with it are myriad and very important. And I'm really glad to just be one of a chorus of voices talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I feel like it's been so refreshing to see the pressure on them from so many different places and bipartisan pressure.
Yeah.
Um, it's I feel like for many years at the beginning of their they started as a bookstore, of course, and so really it was a bookstore, book selling and publishing universe that was affected first, and how scared we were, how under threat we felt, and how we sort of felt like we were screaming into a void and nobody was listening and nobody cared because they were getting cheaper prices. Um, and I mean, that's what, 25 years ago, right? So it's been a long time coming. But
Yeah.
it's, I'm hopeful in ways I didn't think I would get to be ever. And, as we're talking tonight, the workers at the Bessemer, Alabama plant have voted, and we're waiting for the results to see if they're going to be unionized. But um, if that comes to pass, what do you think might happen next?
That's a huge story. I think the union vote is already a huge story, and it's perhaps the most important thing of all of this stuff. So there's a lot going on with Amazon right now. Their new CEO has decided he likes to pick Twitter fights. There was a whole controversy about where their drivers go to the bathroom, which is important. And a lot of people were on social media about that. But among all of it, I think the most important thing is this union vote. And it's pretty clear that Amazon is terrified. The extreme lengths they have gone to prevent this union from being formed are remarkable and evidence of how afraid they are. And I think it's because every Amazon worker is watching this. They all have dangerous conditions, grueling, quotas, grueling tempos that they have to maintain at work. They're dangerous jobs. They're hugely difficult jobs, demoralizing in many cases, and they're watching as these amazing workers in Alabama are working on seizing control of their situation. And I think in that way, it's just the way how far they've already gotten against such incredible odds is already a sign of hope. And there's been a real uptick in in just people making requests to the National Relations Board, Labor Relations Board, both to report violations and to inquire about forming unions. So like the activity has already increased. I think it's already a big deal. But if the union passes, you can bet every fulfillment center in the country is going to have efforts to, I mean, to prove that it can be done. One of the nation's largest employers and one of the nation's most dangerous employers. It's a real watershed moment already, even more so if the union actually forms. It's a big moment for labor rights. I think in a lot of ways, I was just talking today about how the pandemic is like, with the coronavirus, we're replaying things that happened 100 years ago with the Spanish flu pandemic. I think the same thing is happening with corporate monopolies and labor rights. We're facing that big of a moment where the government is kind of itching to get back into a bigger trust busting role, and we've got workers taking back control from these giant companies. And I'm excited to see it play out. And I just feel tremendous solidarity with these workers, regardless of what happens with the votes. They've already been really inspiring and amazing.
Absolutely. One of the, I mean, I got a lot out of every chapter in your book, but the one that I feel like spoke to me most right now in this moment is the fulfillment, and the human cost of next day delivery or same day delivery or any kind of fast delivery. And I feel like we as booksellers who have just gone through this pandemic year got a tiny taste of what it's like to be an online only bookstore. We were closed for about 4 months, closed to the public, doing exclusively online and curbside pickup. And I believe you guys have been closed this whole time. Is that correct?
Yep, we're still closed.
So, having done both now, it is so extraordinarily difficult to be a store where the customers aren't picking out their own purchases. It sounds silly, but every transaction takes more time. Is more likely to have an error. The more books in the order, the happier you are because the more money, but the harder it is to fill. Especially, I was thinking, I sort of had a revelatory moment this year where I was like, wait, I'm a small business, but I'm also expected to be able to access any one of any million of individual items and get it to my customer within a couple of days from Tennessee, from Pennsylvania, from Indiana. This is what is expected of me. And this is what I do on a daily basis. So it's not like a surprise. This is my job. But I think, no, I can't think of another small business that has an unlimited access of product and inventory that they're supposed to be able to present at a moment's notice. So, and what you talk about in the book is how Amazon outsources so much of their delivery. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's something a lot of people still aren't totally aware of.
Right. Well, yeah. So, I mean, and you think, going back to these Twitter fights that they're having, you've got, all these Amazon accounts from Jay Carney, who is the former Obama press secretary and is now an Amazon spokesman, to their new CEO, to whoever's running the Amazon News Twitter account, is talking about, like, our employees have health care and $15 an hour and clean working conditions. But the thing is many people you see driving those Amazon vans aren't actually Amazon employees. It's kind of classic Amazon PR shiftiness. Is they're like, well, our employees get this, but they rely on millions of temp workers that don't get those benefits necessarily. And so these companies spring up. Someone decides they want to start a delivery company. They'll apply to Amazon for a loan to start that business. Amazon will sell them the vans, and Amazon will send them t-shirts for their drivers to wear, and all of their business will be delivering for Amazon. So for all intents and purposes, this is an Amazon operation, but the fact that it's a separate company with contractors instead of employees lets Amazon kind of slide away with all kinds of liability. And it also lets them push much harder than you'd be able to push a UPS or a USPS employee. Both of which I will add are largely unionized, the people who are delivering for USPS and UPS, and they're regulated and they're just highly protected. Those workers at the Postal Service and UPS, those workers are protected in many ways that Amazon third-party contractors aren't. The thing that always gets to me is those vans. They didn't pick those vans for any reason except they're the biggest you can possibly get while still avoiding commercial vehicle inspection. So they're just small enough to squeeze under this regulatory hurdle. Like a van that's as big as the like a UPS delivery truck has to be regulated by the government and pass regular inspections. Um, and like looked at with a much stricter safety standard than the Amazon van, which is as big as you can possibly get without having to face that scrutiny. So that's you just see this at every level with Amazon, squeaking away from responsibility, squeaking away from liability, figuring out how they can push their employees as much as they possibly can. And much of this delivery network is built on this. And so with the delivery infrastructure, they'll have USPS or UPS ship their stuff to central distribution hubs and rely on those places, rely on the great shipping networks we already have. Until they get to what's called the last mile, which when they bring in, that's when they bring in these third-party contractors, and they have 200 or 300 places to go to a day. And like we've done local delivery here, and I'll tell you, our routes max out at 25. And that's 2 hours of grueling work to deliver 25 houses in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm wiped out after 25. Like imagine a whole day with 10 times as many stops. And like anytime you have to find a bathroom, you go off route, and that's 10 or 15 minutes, and that's a huge deal for people trying to get that done before dark. And that's what free next day shipping is built on. You cannot do shipping that fast without a system like this. It's just impossible. It's why shipping that fast and that cheap for all of human history has been science fiction. But Amazon is willing to let go of things like worker safety in order to make it happen, because they want their customers to be obsessed with ordering from Amazon.com. Their word, not mine. Customer obsession. They'll tell you that that's what they're going for.
It's wild. I mean, the whole concept of free shipping, I mean, we even offer free shipping on our website and with a $30 order. But I like to bang the drum this year that, hey, there's no such thing as free shipping. We are the ones who are, the business is paying to ship that. I think, when I sort of posted about that on social earlier last year, I had folks who were like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. I thought you had like a special deal with UPS. And I was like, no, I pay full fare to mail this to you. I'm just trying to be nice and get you to buy something.
That's a thing. Yeah. That's. I mean, big companies do cut deals with UPS, but a bookstore does not. Like, we don't have the leverage or the volume to be able to qualify, which is why the Postal Service is so important, because you don't have to negotiate good deals with the Postal Service. They give good deals to everybody. And why that's my other pet cause is the saving the USPS, but they're related.
100%.
I mean, I think I would argue that a big kind of ancestor of the current crisis at the USPS was them being pushed around by Amazon, and for a long time USPS thought Amazon was going to be their savior. But ultimately, Amazon is building its own rival shipping network to compete with, and eventually overtake the USPS.
Gee, that sounds so familiar. That sounds like something they might do to their third-party sellers.
That's what they do in every industry. I mean, it's it's a pattern. There are a lot of these little patterns.
Yeah, it's really gotten so vast what they do, and I want to just take a minute and remind folks that you can drop questions for Danny into the chat. But the other thing that I feel like is only just dawned on me this past year was the Amazon Web Services and what they are and how much of the internet they run.
Yeah, and that's why you'll notice the title of both the zine and the book are resist and not boycott. In part, we're not really supposed to like get together as bookstores and tell you to boycott someone. That's kind of illegal if you take antitrust laws seriously. Some of us do, others of us don't. But it's also kind of impossible to, if you're an internet user, it's impossible to boycott Amazon. Like anything you do online is going to put money in the pockets of Amazon. I mean, from there's a whole host of websites that uses AWS for the architecture of their server capacity and their hosting. Netflix, maybe even Crowdcast, as much as I hate to say it, might be using AWS for server capacity and other kind of behind the scenes internet things. But also just you look at a website that has an Amazon ad on it, and so many of them do, and you're technically contributing to to Amazon. And so that's not, I encourage people not to think like divest or resist, I think are better terms. I really advocate in my own practice, I try to spend money at businesses that reflect my values and contribute to my communities. And so I think of it more as a positive investment in the businesses I care about. Because as much as I want to, I can't totally divorce from Amazon, which that alone is a cause for concern. Um, but it's much more motivating for me to think I'm going to spend money at this bookstore instead of I'm not going to spend money at Amazon. And it helps me create these really great relationships with all these places that are actively building my community.
That's so true. And I feel like one place that a lot of us have been able to connect with folks has been on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, particularly. I think right now people like to see the human beings that make their shopping experience
Mm-hmm.
happen in a way that before they did not have access to that. Either, um, obviously you can always walk into a store and talk to human beings, but if you are shopping online, you are generally having a transaction with a faceless entity. But social has given us the ability to be that face to our customers all over the country, which has been really extraordinary for us. We have a question in the chat about when you think you might be able to reopen the store and what has kept you closed all this time.
It's a good question. We could have opened a long time ago. What's kept us closed is I did this in the green room. I'm going to try just pivot my camera a little bit and show you. I'm sitting in the children's section of the Raven right now. And right next to me is a giant table full of curbside pickup orders waiting to be picked up. So you can kind of see we're not, and then like over in the fiction room where what used to, and it's like there are boxes everywhere. This is just, it takes this kind of mess and 5 booksellers to run our shipping. It's like it's a big and messy thing to run web fulfillment. We're really lucky to have this many web orders, but we're also really busy and it takes up space. So we've just been beating our head against the walls trying to figure out a way to take up all this space, keep ourselves 6 feet apart, and then bring in customers that are also 6 feet apart. And the math doesn't work with our current location. Um, and it's also my goal going into this pandemic was to keep all my employees on board and to keep them as safe as I possibly could. Those were goals number 1 and 2. I'm proud to say we've been able to do that, but one of this kind of long-term closure is what that's taken. I'm thankful our community has followed us in that. So to get to the answer to your question, where almost all of us, I think maybe all of us have had our first shot now. So, I mean, within 6 weeks, we're all going to have full vaccinated protection, which is really exciting. We're looking at ways to bring back some kind of in-person experience. We're talking about opening a kind of drive-through window on the side of our store so people can walk up and chat with the bookseller and order a book that way. And then sometime in the summer, we'll be moving into a new location, at which point we'll definitely be open for browsing because the new location the interior is designed to handle that issue of having an online order fulfillment center and like a browsable bookstore at the same time. So it's a complicated question, and ultimately the answer is just moving the store.
That's it. I can't wait to come visit you in Lawrence at the new
Can't
store
wait to have you.
someday. We have a question about how, can you talk a little bit more about how Amazon manipulates and undermines third-party sellers? This is
Yeah.
another thing that is invisible to so many
Mm-hmm.
consumers.
So the two huge revenue streams for Amazon that enable them to do things like mess with the price of consumer goods and sell books below wholesale prices and all that stuff that causes so much mayhem in other industries. The two revenue streams are Amazon Web Services, which we've already talked about, and third-party seller fees. So a lot of this, like Suzanna said, is invisible to the consumer and they want it this way. But when you order something on Amazon, it might come direct from an Amazon warehouse. And that'll say something like fulfilled and shipped from Amazon.com. Or it might come from a third party seller, a person who is using the Amazon platform to sell their own set of goods. Amazon calls these people small business owners, and technically they are. But Amazon manipulates and controls and extorts them in many, many ways. Um, so one way they do this is with these huge seller fees, and on average, um, 30% of every third-party transaction on Amazon goes back to Amazon. And like, I could tell you about the Raven. I don't know about Oblong, but if we had to pay 30% of every, I mean, we're only making 40 or 45% of each book, and if you subtract 30% from that, that's just impossible numbers. And that's true of, I would argue, of any business. That's too much. It's actually happens to be the same charge that places like Uber Eats charge from local restaurants. So it's just not sustainable. And these fees are for things like, if you pay us blank percent of this transaction, we'll give you Prime. We'll fulfill it. We'll give you Prime shipping. And if you get Prime shipping, you get a button, the sexy button on your listing, and you get listed higher up. So if you say, no, I want to keep more money on this sale, they're going to bump you down the search rankings, or God forbid, onto the second page where no one ever sees it. And so that's just one way they manipulate you. If you pay them more, they'll bump up your search results, and you'll make more sales, but you'll make much less on each sale. And then if you're a third-party seller and you need to like dispute something with Amazon, or file some sort of appeal, they have an entire court system that's just Amazon run. They have their own government for third-party sellers. There's an entire industry of lawyers who only work on Amazon appeal cases. And it's punitive, it's capricious, it's notoriously difficult to communicate with or appeal any of these decisions to Amazon. So it's not a sustainable business model. They say that Amazon loves small businesses because they offer X million places a platform to do business. But I mean, Amazon's really in charge. Those aren't, and like you're talking about the human face of the bit, like with the social media, what Suzanna was saying about social media. They don't want that. They want the box to say Amazon. They want the delivery driver to say Amazon. They're working really hard to take any branding or personality off of that purchase from you. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, and I think what's going to get them in trouble when the antitrust hammer finally comes down, is the fact that Amazon hosts this Amazon Marketplace system where people can open a shop and sell stuff. They host the infrastructure of this marketplace, but they also compete on it, which means they're writing the rules and playing the sport at the same time. They're both platform and competitor, and that's unfair. If we had rigorous enforcement of antitrust laws on the books, it would be illegal. And I think that's the strongest legal challenge to Amazon at the moment, is this kind of platform and competitor, because they do steal ideas from third-party sellers to make their own products. And that's anti-competitive behavior, and that's why laws like the Sherman Act are here. We just need some guts behind the enforcement of them. But I think there's there's signs of progress.
There are. I feel like for the first time in years and years, it does look like something might actually happen from the government to, I don't want to say break them up, but maybe break them up. They've really been looking at Amazon and Google and Apple and all these big tech players to see, oh, hey, we haven't really been regulating you all this time, and you've grown into these monsters, and oops, maybe we should look into that.
Yeah. It's not even an issue of new laws. It's just enforcing the ones we've got.
Yeah. Yeah. I also like when you talk about the Sherman Act in the book, that the sort of the root of American antitrust theory is around, if the price is lower for the consumer, then it's okay.
Right. And that's the interpretation of antitrust law since the 70s. A guy named Robert Bork wrote a book called The Antitrust Paradox, which argued that the only interpretation for antitrust law is consumer welfare, which said more simply means if a company is lowering prices, the company is good. Nothing that company does can be prosecuted because they're lowering prices for the consumer. And that, I mean, you can see the failures of that argument because it ignores labor conditions, it ignores community investment. It lets companies get away with all kinds of anti-competitive behavior, but arguing that the lower prices is ultimately good. The argument found an ally in a guy named Ronald Reagan. And so we got decades of weak antitrust enforcement because the company, it does lower prices, but Amazon is doing a lot of destructive things that I would argue are ultimately worse for citizens and consumers than simply lowering prices. but yeah, I mean, there's the House Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee had a really big hearing that got a lot of attention, where all four big tech CEOs kind of bumbled their way through a bunch of unsatisfying answers, and then they issued a really powerful and important report at the end of last year, that laid a great legislative framework that I think is seeing some momentum. And you see both sides interested in controlling big tech. I think for different reasons, but any shred of bipartisanship nowadays is a good sign. And then a couple of the appointments have been really great. Like Joe Biden nominated Lena Khan as an FTC commissioner, and Lena Khan, she wrote a study when she was a law student at Yale called Amazon's Antitrust Paradox that basically refutes Robert Bork's line of arguing, and has been the framework for this current wave of antitrust sentiment. And if she's an FTC commissioner, that's a really powerful position for someone with that kind of thinking. And it's also kind of a telegram from the administration where they stand on all this. So yeah, I think I do think this stuff is important. It's not. I don't think it's as sexy to hear about. It's like boycott Amazon, pee in bottles. But I do think this is a government problem with a government solution, and it's important to look at the biggest question is not why do people support Amazon or why do you shop there. The biggest question is why has Amazon been allowed to get away with this? Because that's the only way a company gets this big, is if the government lets it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Heather has a question that it's gonna shift my talk to what can we as consumers do. So Heather's saying lots of really smart people are frequent customers of Amazon. Do you have any advice on how to approach Amazon lovers and help them understand the true cost of doing business via Amazon?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. And like, I think the worst thing you can do is shame anybody about their buying habits. And we at the Raven, I say we because I mean, this is a discussion we have all the time, and everybody at the Raven, all of the booksellers here have to be ready to have this talk. And the last thing we want to do is try to make people feel bad about how they're shopping, because you don't know what people's situation is, and it's just, I don't think it's an argument. It's just, it puts people on the defensive really fast. But what I do think resonates is, again, the kind of pro small business argument, and thinking about the places in your community that are beloved but perhaps struggling, or just places you want to make sure stick around. And bookstores, I think, are a really great example of this, because everybody loves bookstores. I think a healthy bookstore is a sign of a healthy community. But they're also, I mean, bookstores are on the front lines. They're the ones perhaps most affected, or they're affected really strongly by Amazon. The kind of the place I arrive at the end of the book is, if I decide not to buy a hardcover book from Amazon, it's not going to make any difference to them. They're not going to notice. But the bookstore might notice when I buy the hardcover book from them. It might be a slow day. And like, even proportionally, that's a much bigger impact on the bookstore than on Amazon. And so I'm not really resisting Amazon as much as I'm uplifting local businesses. And in that frame, you can talk about the benefits a small business can bring to a community, which can be really big. We pay fair taxes in our community, and like we make sure a fair share of our revenue goes to support the community that supports us. That's an economic argument. But there are also any number of tiny emotional arguments, like who's going to sponsor the Little League teams, who's going to donate gift certificates to the silent auction, who's going to be a great place to go hang out for an hour on a Saturday. It's the small businesses have a great deal of importance in building the idea of a third place, or the commons. Like, that's, so these are, I think those arguments have had much more success with us than the, like, Amazon is bad, don't shop there, what are you doing? That being said, I would never want to lose sight of the risks and dangers of Amazon. I'm not going to let them off the hook. But the core of the argument is one that's trying to uplift small businesses.
I love that messaging, because that really, it speaks to who we are as indie booksellers and what our values are, and how we see ourselves within our community, and it does away with the negativity that I think we were sort of plagued with probably in the early years of Amazon's rise, and how fearful we were and how negative we were then. You know, you mentioned, you just listed like several ways that that we all contribute to our communities. And I did a couple of those things today. Like this
Great,
is
me
something
too.
that we do. We really on a daily basis we are working with our communities. And honestly, since the pandemic, this has become like one of my top three like most important things. Like, is what I'm doing serving this community? Am I
Yeah,
uplifting my fellow businesses? Are we giving back enough to local groups? And we were doing pretty well already, but now we're really doubling down because so many folks have needed help this year. When we had to close our doors, we had a pretty robust email list, and we had e-commerce already to go. So we pivoted really hard and we started emailing folks twice a week to tell them how we were doing, to tell them what they could buy through our website. And I made it a priority to feature other local businesses and organizations in every single email. So many of our retail neighbors didn't have websites, didn't sell online,
yeah.
and were really just cut off at the knees in their ability to do their job. So I think the more we can raise each other up and be on each other's side, and it's really as simple as you just said. Like, Amazon does not care if you bought that book from them, but like every book we sell really means something to us. That money goes right back to our employees. It goes right back to our local schools and our local, paving the roads. Like, we're legit just turning it around right in this community. So I think I'm really grateful to you for your framing of all of this.
Mhm.
Um, and we had a follow up question in the chat about Helen wanted to know. So, because Amazon is an international company, would it require some sort of international consensus for the antitrust stuff, or would it just focus on, can the US do something on its own?
I think. Well, I mean, Amazon is headquartered here, and we are by far the country it has sunk its tentacles into the most. And there are more than 100 million Prime subscribers in the United States, which is roughly a third of Americans have a Prime account, which is truly staggering. Um, so I think any action that happens here would be really important. I think other countries have a head start. The first antitrust charges that have been filed against Amazon happened in the European Union. Like, the EU is the only people so far to actually file charges. I think the US is getting close. And then in places like France or Germany, in the book I talk about France as a model for Amazon resistance on a government scale for two reasons, or three reasons. One, labor unions are more prevalent and more powerful in France. Two, they are one of 13 European countries that have maximum discounts on books by law. So it's illegal to discount a book by more than 5% in France and several other countries. And then three, in Paris, they actually like list bookstores as cultural assets, and they're protected by government grants, and like the bookstores are the ones getting the tax breaks in Paris, and not Amazon, because they're viewed as cultural assets and protected by the government. So I mean, France is a third of the size of the United States, but it has more bookstores than we do. So it's just like those are three things that would really help here, and I think Amazon is trying to expand quickly in other places. There's been a lot of interest around the world for this book. I've sent it to France, Australia, Germany, Japan. People are interested because they're earlier in the process, but they know that if Amazon continues to go unchecked, they'll see things that we're seeing here. But I think serious antitrust action in the United States would do quite a bit.
Excellent. And while I'll have one more question or comment, Jim has mentioned that Amazon is building a distribution center not all that far from us in Fishkill, New York, and they have gotten tax abatements to do so. And that is something that I had my eyeball on last year, but again, I was busy trying to keep my store afloat. Um, and that's not uncommon. I mean,
No.
their whole thing is let's dangle these jobs in front of
Yeah.
lawmakers and say, okay, what can you give us?
Yeah. I don't think they do anything without tax breaks. They've gotten so good at extracting these promises and corporate welfare from governments, state, local, and federal, that they won't do anything without. They'll do very little without the promise of corporate tax breaks. I think the biggest example, the highest profile example of this was the Headquarter 2 search, HQ2, which I write about in the book. But they had this very public competition where cities would send these data-filled packets of information applying to be the site of Amazon's second headquarters. They got hundreds of them. Incredibly valuable demographic information about cities across North America. And it was basically a foregone conclusion that they were going to pick New York and Washington, D.C. And they were going to pick Washington, D.C. because Jeff Bezos knows exactly where the most important resistance is going to come from, and that's the federal government. So he needs to make friends in D.C. and fast to prevent this stuff from happening. And New York because it's kind of the cultural and economic center of the country. And both cities had opposite reactions. And Arlington is falling over to welcome Amazon, and New York basically chased them away through just a tremendous amount of resistance and protest. And it was a secretive deal negotiated behind closed doors. And then the public pressure on Amazon just grew so immense that they were like, forget it. And then months later, they booked a huge chunk of real estate in Hudson Yards at like regular people. Like they paid for the offices, they paid for the space like a normal company would. So like it was, I think, again, another kind of important model of what to do if to resist Amazon on a company scale. This issue of cities, though, I mean, I don't want to steer the conversation too much, but I think this is a really good segue into the book recommendation I was going to give. The How to Resist Amazon and Why is meant to be an introduction. It's very basic intro across many, many issues about Amazon, but there's suggestions for further reading. There's a really in-depth Works Cited page, but a book I didn't get to because it didn't come out in time was Fulfillment by Alec McGillis. And if you're interested in the how Amazon makes entire cities turn into winners and losers, that book does a great job of explaining it. It's incredibly in-depth. It's a great thing to read after you read How to Resist Amazon and Why, because this question of tax breaks and corporate welfare is turning some cities into losers and some cities into winners. And Amazon has that power. They're so big that they can make entire metropolitan areas kind of rise or fall at their will. And that's way too much power for a single company to have. I don't care how many jobs you're providing, like you shouldn't be able to control the fate of an entire city. Yet another piece of evidence that Amazon has gotten too big.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I started to read Fulfillment. I have to go back to it. I was reading it at bedtime, like in bed, and it was giving me such anxiety that I have to stop.
It's a serious
but
book.
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic book. I had asked Danny to share a book recommendation because we are, of course, booksellers first, and recommending books to all of you is the thing that brings, at least for me, brings me pretty much the most joy of my job. The book I was going to recommend is called The Hattack Witches. It's Hatak Witches. And it comes out in mid-April from University of Arizona Press. The author is Devin Mahisua, and it is an indigenous police procedural with like a little bit of magical element to it. And I'm a big mystery reader, and it was fantastic, and I can't wait to get it on the shelves and sell it to all of you.
Devin's an amazing author. I didn't know that they had written a mystery too. They've got a lot of books about indigenous food sovereignty.
Yes,
really cool nonfiction.
They made a digital galley, a advanced copy available to us through Edelweiss, our catalog system, and I downloaded it one night on a whim, and I read it right away, and it was great. So I hope they write more mysteries if they haven't already. Danny, this has been such a fun night, and as someone who's been in this biz a while, I am just super grateful to have to have you be our spokesperson, whether this was the job you wanted or not. But we're all standing next to you with our arms around you, and thank you for your work. And also thanks to Microcosm for making this book into a physical thing that we can all have in our stores.
Yeah.
We're just
I would have never done it without their encouragement. I'm a poet. I never thought I would be writing this a pocket-sized political nonfiction book, but they've done a great job with it. And again, they're evidence that a publisher can do it without Amazon, which is really important. And that's where a lot of book industry people get hung up, is that we can't, like, we hate them as much as anybody, but they're half of our sales, so we have to deal with it. Well, you don't actually. And when Microcosm, when they pulled the plug, their sales went up. I think their sales doubled that year, just because people were so supportive of this. And they're opening a second warehouse. They're doing great. So they're great. They do great stuff, and I'm so happy that the book found a home there.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. I'll mention that if folks got here late or want to share this conversation with others, as soon as it's over, the replay will be available right at the same site. And then also it'll be posted up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So feel free to spread the word. Come into the bookstore or go to our website and order a dozen copies to give to all of the people you love the most. Danny, you're amazing. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to come see you.
Likewise.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.